Hi, it's Nell, and today's video is all about the basics of repotting. So stick around for that. First, I'm going to define repotting, and repotting means going from one pot to another pot, and it's usually a bigger pot. And this video is especially good if you are a beginning gardener, because I'm going to cover the basics here. And I have been repotting plants for a very, very long time. I grew up on a small farm. We had a greenhouse, so I've been doing it for a very, very long time. But you might be new to it, and just like anything, you know, when you learn to drive, when you learn to cook, when you learn to read, when you learn to write, it is a bit confusing, but after you do it for a while, it just becomes second nature, which is what it is to me. But I just want to share what I've learned throughout the years about repotting with you. And I'm just going to touch on things here because this is a really weighty subject. So I'm going to do a blog post as usual to go along with this video. It's going to be a long one, so you can get a lot more details and links in there. There is a whole repotting category on my website, JoyUsGarden. You can also check that out. But most of the information will be in the blog, and you can find that in the description box down below. It'll be in the first 2 or 3 lines. And what I'm going to touch on a lot here is indoor plants. I have a lot of outdoor plants in pots too. I'll probably cover that more in the blog post itself. So I just wanted to tell you that because the first thing we're going to start with is when to repot. And in general, spring and summer are the best times to repot. You can repot into fall too. Just if you're in a climate where it gets cold early, you will want to probably cut off your repotting at the end of summer. Okay, over here with some plants, so it's not me just yakking away. And what I forgot to tell you about what is also going to be in the blog post is I'm going to answer about 15 or so questions, the most asked questions about repotting. So that will be at the end of the blog post waiting for you. And most of the plants that you see here that I'm going to repot, I'm going to do videos on. So stay tuned for that. Actually, I did repot this. If you watched the Christmas succulent garden video, I had I think there were 8 pots, and I consolidated the succulents into 2 pots. Pot size. Some plants like to stay tight in their pots, and like orchids like a tight pot, and they like it taller. So do a little research about the plant and see if there's something specific to it. But in general, you go up a pot size. This beautiful little variegated jade is in a 6-inch pot. This is an 8-inch pot. You could go up to a 10 or a 12 with this. It would be fine. But if you put a plant with a smaller root ball into a bigger pot, especially a house plant, you have to be careful with the watering because you can overwater it. Annuals growing outside in the hot summer, that's a different story. So, and something like a succulent here, they have a shallow root system. They don't have a really extensive root system, so they can all stay nice and tight in a low bowl. But in general, it is the one size up rule. Pot type. There are many different types of pots on the market these days. Most plants, the majority of plants that I know of, both exterior and interior, come in plastic pots. The exterior ones come in a heavier plastic grow pot, but plants do fine in those. There's also terracotta. Ceramic is very popular. This is a concrete. and we're gonna head over to see another different type of pot. So here's an example of a plastic pot. And my, oh my, the plastic pots have gotten so much better looking these days. I like them because they're much easier to move around. Had to go do the old battery change. All right, so the next thing is how to get the plant out of the pot. Most plants come out fairly easily, and a method I use very often is I will squeeze the pot, either put the plant on its side or, depending on the size, squeeze it. Exterior plants, I was a garden designer, and those are bigger, thicker pots, and sometimes the roots of the exterior plants are just coming out the bottom and they're really hard to get out. So we would put them on their side, and I would actually get on top of the plant and I would loosen it that way. And it most times the plant would come out that way. Oftentimes you need two people if a plant is really bound in there, and you might have to cut the roots coming out of the bottom of the pot, especially with exterior plants. Interior plants tend to have a finer root system, so they usually just pull out of the grow pot, but sometimes you will have to take off some of those roots. Another method of getting a plant out of a pot is you take a knife and you run it around the edge of the root ball, in between the root ball and the grow pot right there, and that will also help to loosen it. And in the worst case scenario, you have to cut the pot, which is easy to do if it's a plastic pot, or if it's in a ceramic pot or something like that, you might have to break the pot. I've only had to break a pot like a couple times, and it was a terracotta pot, but most plants you can get out using one of those methods I just talked about. Soil mix. Soil mix is specific to the plant, the type of plant that you are potting, so do your research on that. Succulents and cactus. Well, cacti are actually technically succulents. We all think of, these fleshies as, succulents, but the cacti are succulents too. They prefer a different type of mix. Orchids prefer a different type of mix. Bromeliads do, especially in the case of interior plants. You want to make sure that the mix has something in it to amend the drainage, because you want it to drain out and not be too heavy, not get too wet. So you would use something like perlite, pumice. I'll put links to all these things in the blog post, or something like these clay pebbles. They're clay, they're very light, they aerate. I'm going to use a lot of these when I repot my Dracaena Lisa, because it is in lava rock, so it's used to growing in something like that. So I don't want to put it into all potting soil, so it's probably going to be half potting soil and half lava rock and half of this clay pebble stuff. And I have repotted a lot of succulents, and I make my own succulent and cactus mix now. Actually, I'm going to be planting this directly into a ceramic container within the next few weeks, so you'll see the mix I use for my variegated jade. Now, I had a variegated jade growing outdoors in Santa Barbara underneath my jacaranda tree in almost all shade, but this is going to be a houseplant for me. Now we're going to cover the steps to repotting. Try to go through these quickly too. The first thing you want to do is make sure the root ball has been watered. I usually do it anywhere from 2 to 4 days before I repot a plant, because you don't want to do that to one that is stressed. So after you've done that, then you can loosen the plant and get it out of the pot. And then into the new pot, let me see. Let me get an example. So you fill in with the mix so that the top of the root ball is even with the top of the pot, or maybe like half an inch below, half an inch to an inch below. And then you put the root ball in. Actually, the step before that is you might want to loosen the root ball a bit, which is just, I'm going to see if I can get this out. I don't know if I'm not going to be able to get that out because of the root there, but you'll just massage, the root ball a bit. Oftentimes too, if the roots are really bound at the bottom, I will gently cut them so that it just gives them a little bit of a direction to grow out, because they've been bound so much. So then you would put the soil in, and then the plant goes in, and then you fill in around with the mix. And in the case of most plants, you water them after you repot. The exception being succulents and cacti. I keep them dry for anywhere from 2 to 7 days before I water them. Something like a string of pearls, it's only like a day or two because the stems are so thin, but that is just a generalization. And make sure that the plant is in the center of the pot, because in most cases that's what you want. If you're planting a grouping or a bunch of annuals, that's not going to apply, but you want it in the center of the pot so that the roots can fill in all the way around, and also pay attention to getting the plant up straight, unless there's some reason you want it to grow off to the side. But in the majority of cases I can think of, you want the plant to grow straight up. I'm going to cover how to repot a large plant in the blog post, because some of you may not be interested in that. So that'll be in the post, along with more details, links to the products and other stuff, to a lot of repotting things that I have done, and also the answers to all of the questions. The first one is pretty obvious. The root ball has outgrown the pot and the roots are showing. You can see there's a really large root coming out there. That is probably the most common reason that you would repot. The soil mix has gotten old. The plant and the pot are a good fit for each other, but the plant has been in that soil for a while and it just needs some new, fresh soil mix. The roots are really exposed at the top of the pot is another reason. The soil has really sunken down on this. I have not had this plant that long, this aglaonema. I've only had it like 3 or 4 months, but I'm going to repot it very soon because the roots are really exposed, and also too, it is leaning. That's another reason. If the plant is growing like this, I can straighten it up a bit and get the plant to grow more straight. All right, next is the plant has gotten heavy or lopsided and it just needs a bigger base. This is my philodendron Congo. It doesn't even stand up. I have it propped up in the basket it's in because these stems are so heavy and there's a lot of growth on this side, so just going But this one I'll probably actually go up to a 10-inch pot just because it is so lopsided. A plant has been overwatered, and this is common especially with beginning gardeners. I know I have overwatered a few plants in my horticultural lifetime, and oftentimes it will recover when you put it in fresh soil. Sometimes it won't, depending on how waterlogged it is, but it is worth a try. Another reason is you want to put it in a soil mix that is appropriate for the plant. Oftentimes the growers, especially the big growers, will use the same mix across the board for all the different kinds of plants they're growing. So you'll oftentimes find, or you might find like succulents growing in a heavier mix and they like a really nice light mix. So that would be another reason to repot. And another reason, in the case of my Monstera here, it is in a 6-inch pot. There's a little bit coming out the bottom, not too much, but it's just not in portion. It is only March 1st, so once we get into our really warm, whether this plant's going to take off because they grow fast. So I just want a bigger pot that is more in proportion with this plant. So again, with this one, I will probably go up to a 10-inch pot because it is getting to be a good size. I'm going to cover how to repot a large plant in the blog post because some of you may not be interested in that. So that'll be in the post along with more details, links to the products and other stuff, to a lot of repotting things that I have done, and also the answers to all of the questions. So I hope you have found this video on repotting basics to be helpful. I have a lot more videos coming your way, so stay tuned for those. I thank you for all your likes and your subscribes. I really appreciate them. And now let's get out in our outdoor gardens or our indoor gardens and make our world a more beautiful place. I thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.